concept here. Oops. That's not supposed to be straight up. Anyway. Alright, sorry. Basically, I really kind of don't know. Maybe it'd be like that. It's kind of doesn't really make sense, but does. But what if there's no such thing as zero? In the sense that that's not even better. Well, obviously because it doesn't exist, other than as a concept. But what if in this kind of mathematical, not no, it's energy, mathematical energy applied, you get just like a physics simulator or sandbox or modulator, where you have to have some form of zero, but it's just a reference point. The reference point in what we think as zero, nothing, doesn't exist. And it would be like saying if you walked out the kind of like the last exit or something, there's still a hallway behind that door that just leads to the last hallway or the exit door, and then after that the after last hallway, and it just goes the other side. And maybe though there's still a direction, and so it's not just like an endless procession. But it could be that instead of like you know two itself is still questionable. We don't see He doesn't see the relation. We don't even know. Um, but we know there's a one, and then we know there's something infinite in a sense that the one comes out of. And so, but that doesn't we that linear logic doesn't follow that then the nothingness also contains within that everything. Um, kind of, as an abstract you can apply that, but how does that make sense? If we're supposed to map it in the loosest possible term, I can apply that to what I'm doing here. In the sense that dropping the threshold between one or something, one, and then, something, and then nothing, which doesn't exist, is basically, maybe we can go like that in the same sense, is like a placeholder for whatever is on the other side of a kind of dimensional veil or barrier system, a reality system, or transfer system. And so the point is that each side seems to have an extension, or maybe they come kind of at layers like that. And so what if where the one is going across, you don't actually hit what we would conceive to be zero, but you get some combination of something like this. I think, what is it, with the 9 be in the middle, then I believe something like that. And or is it? I think these switch, so then you have these two go back and forth. Then that's, I think, stabilized, and so you have a kind of reference point, and maybe from here within this kind of almost like the recycling symbol or something, this kind of autonomous rotary transfer point, if you will. It can face, say this can be facing any dimension, or it can be oriented, excuse me, oriented as the baseline kind of reference point, as some type of mathematical physics blueprint for universes, and it's the floating foundation or center point kind of through which multiple extensions can be not formed. It's as if they're already there, or they're formed instantly, but they act as the map, or the central piece of the kind of conjoining factor of the map based upon the math itself, or whatever physics enable this. It's kind of transcendental, perpetual physics machine, if you will, based on reality machine based on physics, and as such, they can pretty much position themselves at, I think I did that wrong, at any angle. Let me see if I'm okay. Actually, don't even know. Don't think I did that right. So I guess it depends on how I position them, and I'm sure somebody knows this better than I'm drawing it. But ultimately, okay, I think it would be like something like that. And this thing, this invisible blueprint of mathematical intersection of potential realities, it's as if based upon this, it can project that kind of platform. I'm just going to keep drawing the same pattern out in multiple potential systems, and you see it's kind of based upon itself in the sense that you could just have multiple layers of this, and then this could rotate, and then you have, that, and so on, and it just go on. It would always be the top and bottom energetically, if you will. But the way they kind of wave out and their range, their variation, they have maybe the same stretch, if you will, or they overlap, but they could be oriented in different ways to the point where, say, the consciousness perception, the blueprint, the experience itself of each one could be distinctly different, like basically realities within realities. And so then the idea is that in mapping that out, we have still needs another one. In mapping that out, we can see kind of like, and again, I haven't really fully thought how this, I'm gonna explain this, if you will, out as if that could be that, or that, that, and then all those potentials are overlaid, including the kind of offset in each different potential. And so it's kind of like a prismatic effect of realities within realities. And so the point is, in the center of it, of each one, it's that pattern that allows reality to angle itself differently, which then twists these over and corresponds them. We have different ones, but maybe the point is there is one overall hyperdimensional consistency in up or down. And so these realities are kind of like the magnetosphere map of different physical interactions, charges, the solar winds, and all that stuff. That you could draw that out everywhere, and you have that happening in a big tangle all over the place. It's concentrated there, and you're zoomed out, so you see that. But you could say everything is doing that. A photon is doing that in a very defined form, and then in the same sense, not so defined. If we're gonna look at modern definitions, but so say you align all the realities according to this central blueprint or map that you understand within the one you're operating in, and align your motions towards that, and then as a result you see how you're influencing based upon that the alignment of other realities, and you bring them into alignment to the point where you get this all, not all shining, but it's as if it's brighter and all the lines line up, and therefore you can see everything clear and it goes farther. It doesn't make much sense, but it's like having the difference between a map and you're walking around suburbia or trails in the woods or something, and having like a map, I don't want to say of a city, but of a city, but if it were a diamond city that everything was organized according to a perfect lattice structure, that kind of, I don't know, equalized time or something, and gave you your sense of unity in a way that we kind of take for granted, but could be a function of reality in itself. To the point. So then, in that sense, that while you're in one reality, looking, I mean, the idea here is then the meaning, at least the point of the idea, the point of the whatever, is that there's always one up and one down. So as long as you find your baseline in your core reality, which might just be inside you, like your intentions, it will begin to align, and you'll see where that wants to get thrown off. And it's kind of relative to the previous video. You'll see where that's beginning to get thrown off with whatever you're doing, wherever you're at, and something's trying to influence you. And when you see like this is the time at this point in the day, or you're at this place, or whatever it is, you usually like lapse out of consciousness, and it's controlling you or annoying you or pushing you to lose focus on your real practice. And you don't see it, and then you see it drop back. Whatever energy was over there is pulled back. It's like you're literally doing work to stop yourself from losing focus. And it's as if that's kind of like organizing some type of reality clock, heart system, mind system of multiple planes or versions of the same kind of challenge that your soul is under, your mind is under, repeating over and over again. And when you see the whole picture of the repeating challenges for your mind, we call that the soul. And somehow the information of each is transferred throughout, and it's around you, in some way, potentially non-physical or so on. The idea then is that you're basically walking around. More stick figures. I don't know why he was doing a karate kick. It's rock climbing. And so you're in the one doing that, and if that's kind of the person's blind, then those other realities that are kind of undulating off based upon the decisions and the actions here, they could end up over here and it's aligned to this, so that you'd have to be over here to be reaping the benefit, if you will, to call it that, or just gathering your energy back like a boomerang that goes up and then comes back in creation as what you're looking for, as a reality that can house your soul that you can continue on in. It's as if they're displaced and you have to like jump over here to get to it, and there's this big disorienting process. Whereas if you start from here and build your foundation and continue on, which is what naturally happens, meaning you have to start, and as you go forward, then what you've built based upon those intentions and so on, it doesn't need to be corrected, because I don't even know. It can only be corrected to a certain point, meaning you have to have enough energy applied towards not correcting it, but simply not towards doing wrong, basically. Otherwise, past a certain point, it's like the crystal that grows couldn't be made clear because it would be too jumbled in the other layers. But in that sense, that your head is always on top in these realities, because you're placing the projection of what you're doing here as if it's going to go out to a being that much more important, or that much more influential over a million years, to use metaphors here to make it easier to understand. And in your mind, you're doing that and taking it that seriously, and as a result, the mind that takes it seriously here is the mind that takes it seriously in these larger realities, just like ripples in a pond that echo out in time-space, but that's just a made-up concept. And it's really just like a layer of what we're growing. But and in that sense, it's as if you could be just in chaos, not having these lined up right, kind of like a clock, and then at each point it would be like having numbers at different parts of the clock where the hands don't even hit. You'd have to bend the hands of the clock back in on itself to go down a little bit because the 4 is kind of out of place. You can't do that. We'd have to have weird neural mental surgery, which is kind of like what our species or society has been doing this whole time, with multiple different combined times, if you will, or ways to do things, and ways to be, if you will. And in that sense, though, the difference might be then one who does this in life, what they're actually doing, it's revealed to be that they're this actual larger being with everything 9 times the amount of energy and energy to time-space ratio or dimension, literally almost volumetrically, kind of a ratio, to the point where it's just like maybe whatever perception you have of time and space here would be 9 times more in terms of whatever your energy is, whatever you're using to measure yourself. So your perception, your time, your power, your intellect, your scope of perception, your ability to see into your own mind, maybe your time or potential. And if it's increased like that, it would probably be, say, a dream isn't a dream, or a thought. Say a thought you have right here for 2 seconds could be as powerful as a dream you have throughout the entire night at this power level. And it changes you sometimes when you have dreams that are that powerful. And a dream from that being's perspective, or your maybe truer self on the farther end of the the system we're in that allows you to see a lot more instead of just this inside layer stuck inside a small aspect of the crystal, if you will, where it's fine to be in there, but then if you don't know because somebody said, oh, but here's this map to where you from where you came from, and they just jumbled it all up and drew a picture of Chuck E. Cheese or something, it, we'd be lost, and so it would be like being deep into a cave, even though we're in a crystal lattice structure that you can see clearly through if you look up, or if you wanted to. Um, and so maybe the dreams in that place could be like lifetimes we experience here. And so you get this dimensional interplay where it's like these what ifs or could be's, but they provide the potential for the energy potential, the informational potential for simulation enough to actually map out enough variation to accurately describe what we're experiencing now in a sense of what could be at the depth of what we're experiencing now. And your mind is capable of that. But the idea is that with that, there's no zero. It's just a 3, 6, and 9 pretending, and it's really a 3 and a 6, and the 9 is overseeing it or stabilizing it in multiple different dimensional references. And it's that there's one up and down. So when you're stepping fully here and the power of knowing how that changes, you could get to a level where you're literally moving across eons of time in hyperspace, walking across a world at a time, and because the perceptual expanse, the matching, the scaling up could be proportionally accurate to what you're doing here based upon that balanced kind of mathematical continuity system that's we're looking at, or I'm theorizing, and as many people have, it would potentially preserve your consciousness, at least as hyper consciousness at that state in your not persona, but your the part of you that's witnessing or is interacting with free will, if you will. Sorry. And to the point where you could literally be in that space, in that hyperspace, and interact as you would walking around, drinking a cup of water, doing whatever you're doing here with that level of consistency, that level of stabilization. But again, across eons of time, drinking entire libraries worth of knowledge with single thoughts, your biological processes, the things that are already produced for you here, like an autonomous system that you're plugged into, and you didn't do none of that. Okay, that's made for you, and as the dimensional system increases, that variation increases, and if you are with it in the center, then you gain control, or you remain in control over those biological processes if you've had control here, because if you didn't have control here, you can't have it there, because it's not there. It just is what it is. It's not like this then, or if and after, it's all one. I don't mean people, I mean it's happening at once. You still are you, even if things get put into interface in different dimensions. It's still the same individual. However, the perception might shift through. But the idea is your reference point for how your perception defines itself up and down, so to speak, your not embodiment, but your mental embodiment wouldn't change and would preserve itself through that system if it's utilized properly, basically by adding each layer after one another and not clinging to one or more frozen versions of the potential high point, if you will, of that variation system, because the system that we're using puts everything into order as long as your intentions are to remain in that imbalance and to remain in free will. We didn't design none of this, and so by saying we have to create certain things to get pleasure out of reality is a delusion, and it's all provided, but we have to actually build upon what's been given to us and what we're doing now, and we get ninefold whatever we put in, and that's the basis, that's the default of it. Just a quick night video, thank you.